Deep beneath the ancient, rustling leaves of the whispering woods, where sunlight dared not venture, lived the Rootlings. These tiny, industrious creatures, no bigger than a plump acorn, spent their days tending to the vast, intricate network of roots that crisscrossed their underground home. Their tunnels, carved with care and illuminated by soft, glowing moss, hummed with the quiet industry of a community dedicated to keeping the surface plants healthy and happy. Every rootling knew their purpose. Strong roots meant strong trees, and strong trees meant a thriving world, both above and below. In the busiest part of the Rootling burrow, along the main thoroughfare known as the Great Rootway, lived two siblings, Bud and Blossom. Bud, with his perpetually messy leaf cap and boundless energy, was always darting from one task to another, often leaving a trail of half-finished projects. Blossom, on the other hand, wore her moss-woven tunic neatly, her tiny spectacles perched on her nose as she meticulously organized her collection of polished pebbles. "Bud, are you sure you watered the Whispering Willow's feeder root this morning?" Blossom called out, her voice a little too precise, as Bud zipped past her, humming a tuneless melody. "It needs exactly 3 dewdrops, not 2, not 4. Bud skidded to a halt, kicking up a tiny cloud of dust. "Of course, Blossom, I'm not a sproutling. Besides, I'm off to check the Sunseeker Sunflower's taproot. It's got a funny wobble." "Wobble?" Blossom gasped, adjusting her spectacles. "Bud, you always exaggerate. Last week you said the berry bush had singing roots when it was just a cricket." "It was singing," Bud insisted, puffing out his chest. "You just don't have an ear for root music, Blossom." "I have an ear for facts, Bud, and the fact is you're always rushing and making things up," Blossom retorted, placing her hands on her hips. "Someone needs to be responsible around here. And someone needs to lighten up," Bud shot back, sticking out his tongue playfully. Before Blossom could formulate a proper reply, a low rumbling began. It started as a distant tremor, growing quickly into a deafening roar that shook the very roots of their home. Dust rained down from the tunnel ceiling, and the glowing moss flickered wildly. Rootlings scurried in every direction, their tiny faces etched with fear. "What in the Whispering Woods is that?" Blossom cried, clutching her pebble collection. Bud, for once, was speechless, his eyes wide as saucers. The rumbling intensified, culminating in a colossal thud that reverberated through the entire burrow. The Great Rootway, their vital main tunnel, was suddenly plunged into shadow. A massive, fuzzy, white object, far larger than any rootling had ever seen, had crashed through the ceiling, wedging itself tightly, completely blocking their path. It was enormous, fluffy, and utterly impenetrable. It's a giant cloud!" a tiny rootling whimpered. "No," whispered Elder Root, their wise and ancient leader, his voice trembling slightly. "It's worse. Much, much worse. It's a dandelion seed, and it's stuck." A stunned silence fell over the Great Rootway, broken only by the frantic whispers of the smaller rootlings. The dandelion seed, a fluffy white behemoth, completely filled the tunnel, its feathery tendrils brushing against the glowing moss walls. Elder Root, his ancient antennae twitching with concern, approached the colossal obstruction. "A dandelion seed," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "If it takes root here, It will grow and grow until it blocks us off completely. Our supply lines to the surface will be cut. The whispering woods, they depend on us. Panic began to ripple through the crowd. "But how did it get here?" cried a young rootling. "And how do we move it?" Elder Root sighed. "A strong gust of wind, perhaps, or a clumsy squirrel. As for moving it, that is the dilemma." Immediately, the rootling community sprang into action. Strong-backed rootlings, usually tasked with shifting pebbles and small roots, strained against the fuzzy mass. They pushed and pulled, grunted and groaned, but the dandelion seed remained stubbornly in place. Its soft exterior seemed to absorb their efforts, yielding slightly only to spring back, mocking their strength. Others tried to nibble at its edges, but the fibrous material was surprisingly tough, leaving their tiny teeth aching. A group of nimble rootlings attempted to climb over it, only to slide down its slippery surface like a fluffy mountain. Bud, always one for immediate action, pushed his way to the front. "This is silly. We need a big push. Everyone, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, push!" A collective groan followed, but the seed didn't budge an inch. Bud stumbled back, frustrated. It's like pushing a cloud, a very, very stubborn cloud. Blossom, meanwhile, had been meticulously examining the seed, circling it with her spectacles glinting. "Pushing is inefficient, Bud. We need leverage, and perhaps a precise cutting tool. If we could just snip off a few of these outer filaments, it might loosen." "That's the promise. Snip, Blossom, it's huge. We don't have a tool big enough for that," Bud scoffed. "We need brute force. And brute force, as you've just demonstrated, leads to nothing but tired muscles and disappointment," Blossom retorted, tapping her foot. "We need a plan, a proper plan, with measurements and calculations." "Calculations won't move a giant seed, Blossom. We need to hit it hard," Bud argued, picking up a small loose stone. "And risk damaging the tunnel? Or worse, breaking the seed and releasing thousands of tiny seeds that will sprout everywhere?" Blossom's voice rose in exasperation. "Think, Bud, think!" "I am thinking. I'm thinking about getting this thing out of our way," Bud yelled, throwing his hands up. Elder Root stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "Children, arguing will not dislodge the seed. We have perhaps 2 sun cycles before it begins to sprout. We need a solution, and we need it together." He looked from Bud's frustrated face to Blossom's worried one. "This is bigger than any one of us. It requires more than just strength and more than just logic. It requires both." Bud and Blossom exchanged a glance, their usual bickering momentarily forgotten in the face of the elder's words and the looming threat. The dandelion seed sat there, a silent, fluffy challenge, daring them to find a way. The air in the Great Rootway was thick with worry, but Elder Root's words hung in the air, a quiet challenge. Bud, still fuming from his failed big push, kicked a loose pebble. Blossom, ever practical, had pulled out a tiny scroll made of dried leaf and was sketching furiously with a charcoal twig. "It's just not fair," Bud grumbled, mostly to himself. "It's too big. We need a giant to move it." "Thanks. Giants don't live underground, Bud," Blossom stated, not looking up from her scroll. "And even if they did, they'd probably just track mud everywhere. We need something that can apply continuous, gentle pressure, or Perhaps something that can vibrate it loose. Bud scoffed. Vibrate? Are we going to tickle it out of the way? We need to pull it, like a giant tug of war. He grabbed a sturdy root tendril and tugged, nearly falling over. Blossom sighed, pushing her spectacles up her nose. Pulling from one side will only make it jam tighter. We need to push from all sides, or create a vacuum, or perhaps... She trailed off, her eyes scanning the tunnel. If only we had something strong enough to wrap around it, something flexible yet unyielding. Bud, still fiddling with the root tendril, suddenly looked up. Flexible and unyielding? Like a really, really long, strong vine? Blossom paused, her charcoal twig hovering over the leaf scroll. A vine? Where would we get a vine strong enough and long enough down here? The great vine of the Whispering Woods, Bud exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. It goes all the way down to the deepest roots. It's super strong, and it's always wiggling a little. We could tie it around the seed, and then we could pull it from the other side of the tunnel. Blossom tapped her chin. Pulling from the other side, that is clever, Bud. But how do we get the vine around the seed? It's completely blocked. Bud's face fell. Oh, right. Unless, Blossom mused, her eyes widening, we don't pull it from the other side of the tunnel. What if we pull it from the other side of the seed itself? She pointed to the very top of the dandelion, where a tiny gap existed between its fluffy crown and the tunnel ceiling. If we could get a small, nimble rootling to climb over the top, they could drop the vine down the other side. A small, nimble rootling, Bud repeated, then snapped his fingers. Like a glowworm. They're light and they can glow to see in the dark gaps. Excellent, Bud! Blossom exclaimed, a genuine smile spreading across her face. And if we had a team of strong rootlings pulling the vine from both sides, we could create a rocking motion, like a seesaw. Their eyes met, a spark of shared excitement replacing their usual rivalry. They had found their big idea. It wasn't just Bud's strength or Blossom's logic. It was a blend of both. They raced to Elderroot, their voices overlapping as they explained their plan. Recruit the agile glowworms, find the great vine, and organize a massive, coordinated tug-of-war to rock the dandelion seed free. Elderroot listened, a wise smile growing on his face. A most ingenious plan, he said, nodding. Now to put it into action. The Great Rootway buzzed with a newfound energy. Bud, brimming with enthusiasm, was already organizing the strongest rootlings into 2 teams, one for each side of the dandelion seed. You and you and you, he barked, pointing with his leaf cap. Strongest pullers up front. We need maximum wiggling power. Blossom, meanwhile, was meticulously briefing a small squadron of nimble glowworms. Remember, little ones, she instructed, her voice calm but firm. You must climb precisely to the very top, find the smallest gap, and then drop the grapevine down the other side. No detours, no distractions, and whatever you do, don't tickle the seed. The glowworms, their tiny lights bobbing with excitement, saluted and began their ascent, their glowing bodies disappearing into the narrow space above the seed. Soon, the great vine, thick and surprisingly springy, was draped over the dandelion seed, its ends held firmly by the 2 teams of rootlings. Bud took charge of the push team on one side, while Blossom, with a whistle made from a hollowed-out seed pod, prepared to direct the pull team on the other. Elder Root stood nearby, observing with a hopeful glint in his ancient eyes. "All right, Rootlings," Bud yelled, flexing his tiny muscles. "On my mark, we push! Push!" The Rootlings pushed, their little feet scrabbling against the tunnel floor, their faces red with effort. The dandelion seed vibrated slightly, but didn't move. "No, Bud, no!" Blossom cried, blowing her whistle sharply. "We need coordination. It's a wiggle and pull. Listen for my whistle." Bud groaned, but nodded. This was Blossom's part. Okay. Everyone listen to Blossom." Blossom took a deep breath. "Team push on my long whistle, push. Team pull on my short whistle, pull. And remember, it's a gentle rock, not a yank." Beep! The push team strained, their little bodies pressing against the fluffy seed. Peep! Short whistle. The pull team tugged on the vine, their feet braced. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the giant dandelion seed began to sway. A collective gasp went through the Rootlings. It was working. The rhythmic pushing and pulling, combined with the slight give of the vine, was creating a gentle rocking motion. "Again!" Blossom commanded, her voice filled with renewed determination. Puffy, peep, back and forth, the seed swayed. Dust motes danced in the glowing moss light, and the tunnel echoed with the grunts and groans of the Rootlings. Suddenly, with a tremendous swoosh, a shower of fluffy dandelion fluff erupted from around the seed. It had shifted, not entirely free, but it had moved several inches, creating a small gap at the bottom. The Rootlings cheered, their tiny voices echoing with triumph. "It's moving!" Bud shouted, high-fiving a nearby Rootling. "Just a little more!" Blossom exclaimed, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. "Keep going, everyone! We're almost there!" The dandelion seed was still a formidable obstacle, but the initial breakthrough had filled the Rootlings with hope. The combined efforts of Bud's energetic pushing and Blossom's precise coordination had proven that even the biggest problems could be solved when different strengths worked together. The final push was yet to come, but for the first time, the Rootlings truly believed they could do it. The Great Rootway vibrated with renewed effort. The Rootlings, energized by your initial success, pushed and pulled with all their might. Bud, covered in dandelion fluff, was a whirlwind of encouragement, his voice hoarse but determined. "Almost there, team. One big wiggle, one big push." Blossom, her spectacles slightly askew, maintained her precise rhythm, her whistle cutting through the grunts and cheers. "Synchronize! Push! Pull! That's it, Rootlings! That's it!" The dandelion seed, groaning faintly, began to shift more noticeably. The gap at the bottom widened, and a sliver of light from the surface filtered through the roots, momentarily pierced the gloom. Then, with a final mighty thwomp and a cloud of fluffy white, the giant dandelion seed popped free. It tumbled down a newly revealed side tunnel, rolling harmlessly away into a forgotten cavern, leaving the Great Rootway clear and open once more. A roar of triumphant cheers erupted from the Rootlings. They danced, they hugged, they even did silly little root wiggles of joy. Elder Root, his face beaming, clapped his tiny hands together. "Magnificent! Truly magnificent! You have saved our home!" Bud and Blossom, breathless and covered in fluff, looked at each other. Bud, for once, didn't boast. "We did, Blossom," he said, a genuine sense of awe in his voice. Blossom, usually composed, giggled. "We certainly did, Bud. Your big push combined with my clever plan worked perfectly." She even offered him a rare, genuine smile. "And your whistle was super helpful," Bud admitted, a blush creeping up his antenna. "I guess brute force isn't always enough. And a plan needs someone energetic to put it into action," Blossom conceded, adjusting her spectacles. Perhaps we make a good team." "The best team," Bud declared, pulling her into a fluffy, slightly sticky hug. From that day on, the Great Rootway hummed with even more purpose. Bud still rushed sometimes, and Blossom still liked things just so, but their bickering was replaced by a newfound respect and understanding. They learned to combine their strengths, Bud's boundless energy and Blossom's meticulous mind, tackling every Rootling challenge together. They even discovered that the dandelion seed, now nestled in the forgotten cavern, had begun to sprout, its vibrant green leaves reaching for a tiny crack in the ceiling, creating a new secret garden for the glowworms. And sometimes, when the wind whispered through the roots of the whispering woods, you could almost hear a faint, happy chuckle from deep underground, the sound of two siblings, once at odds, now working side by side, knowing that every problem, no matter how big or fluffy, could be solved with a little cooperation and a lot of friendship. The Rootlings thrived, and the Whispering Woods flourished, all thanks to the day Bud and Blossom learned to work together to solve the Dandelion Dilemma.